New report has found that climate change-related misinformation
and found misinformation about the conflict between Israel and Hamas.
Announcing new steps they're taking to fight Russian disinformation.
These have sparked a whole new wave of disinformation and hate online.
Political disinformation is not a new concept, but it's spread more rapidly in recent years.
Humanity is filled with good and bad actions, joys and dramas. But if we were to evoke the 17th century philosopher and mathematician Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, we might say that if the smallest evil that occurs in the world didn't happen, this world would no longer be what it is, which, all things considered, is still the best of all possible worlds. Yet in recent decades, a widespread sense of distrust and skepticism has permeated parts of our societies, fueling suspicions and doubts that often translate into dangerous conspiracy theories. Wars, economic crises, a global pandemic, and extreme weather events have resurfaced insecurities and fears that we thought we had overcome. This pessimism has made us vulnerable to false or distorted information for political, ideological, or commercial purposes. Welcome to Worst Worlds, where we unmask how and why fake news is secretly sabotaging our lives, and try to understand how to be smarter and not get fooled.
Well, I think that if all the scientists would use 2% of their time to communicate science in some professional way, things will be really changed. Some of the problem is that most of the scientists do not know how to communicate science, in the sense that no one has learned, no one has taught to them how to communicate, and if you do not do the exercise of communication, you don't learn.
Speaking is the 2021 Nobel Prize winner in Physics, Giorgio Parisi, who has been applying his studies on complex systems not only in physics, but also in other disciplines such as cognitive and social sciences. If we take a moment to reflect, we live in an extremely complex and simultaneously vulnerable system. We can worry about violent floods that destroyed the outskirts of Valencia, or about future pandemics triggered by intensive farming. But what about the power of a single tweet? In July 2024, in the coastal city of Southport, about 30 kilometers north of Liverpool, a boy stabbed 11 people during a dance and yoga event, killing 3 children. False information soon began circulating on social networks regarding the identity of the boy. A profile on the social network X, with a name similar to that of a real broadcaster, Channel 3 Now, was the first to claim that the suspect was a Muslim asylum seeker already known to the police. These claims were all untrue, but it nonetheless sparked a riot with disorder, violence and protests. 50 police officers were injured, but the unrest could have had much graver consequences. The Southport incident is just one of the many cases where misinformation has caused serious harm. It's worth remembering that during the COVID-19 pandemic, over 800 people died and nearly 6,000 people were hospitalized after ingesting methanol, a toxic substance sold as a cure for the virus. And this was before the vaccine conspiracies had even arrived. Every day, millions of citizens are bombarded with inaccurate, manipulated, or completely invented news for political, economic, and ideological purposes. Like the story that climate change is a Western invention to increase the exploitation of developing countries. One consequence of misinformation is the growing mistrust in institutions and the stability of our democratic systems. We discussed this with Sir 𝙒𝙂𝙧𝙨𝙯, one of the leading epidemiologists internationally.
It says, now I'm going to read you a list of people, and I want you to tell me if you trust them to tell the truth. Nurses, number one, 93% of the population trusts nurses to tell the truth. Doctors, 90%, pretty good, not quite as good as nurses, but pretty good. And scientists, teachers, judges, the population trusts them to tell the truth. You can guess who brings up the rear? Politicians, trusted by 12%. Government ministers, surprisingly slightly more trusted than politicians general, maybe 20%. Just behind journalists at 24%, and they're behind estate agents at 25%. So the people who run our lives are not trusted by the general population. And that's a real dilemma, because they vote for these people. They don't trust them, but they vote for them. So they hold their noses and vote for one or the other. It's alarming. It's alarming. And I don't think we solve that by nurses becoming prime minister. But somehow, those of us who are trusted need to speak up.
Despite the efforts of researchers, governments, civil society and scientists to track misinformation and develop counter-strategies, still not enough is being done. And as Nobel Prize winner Parisi recounts, fanciful conspiracy theories continue to circulate abundantly.
I read once someone that on the internet that was saying that the particle reserves center in Europe in CERN, which was near Geneva, it was a base of CIA, and the CIA was communicating with CERN using submarine. CERN in the middle of Europe, so it's 500 kilometers from the sea, and the submarine were going from Geneva to the sea in an underground tunnel. How can a grown-up person believe such a nonsense?
But when the challenge is against such fanciful beliefs, how can we win in the game of rationality?
First of all, I think that analysis of trends on social networks is extremely important, and also extremely important to try to understand the people who spread the disinformation on social networks. And I think that is something that is connected to the anti-elitism. Is related to the fact that people are very dissatisfied by the present situation, and they are against, very dissatisfied also because they have a lot of fear of the future. There is not optimism on the future. Many people think that the future will be worse than the present. And this is opposite to what happened a long time ago. And there is a rage against people that are responsible of having arrived to the present quite the not satisfactory situation. And science is perceived to be a form of the elite, to be collusive with the elite, I mean to have a strong relation with the rest of the elite, to have in common interest, and they cannot be trusted because they are going in the direction of the interest of the elite and not in the interest of the people.
We asked Professor Marmot if there is a vaccine against misinformation.
I see that as part of a broader issue of education. I think of education as being important for health, that education gives you life skills. You can appreciate rubbish, nonsense. You have a nonsense detector. Mostly people who are educated understand the scientific evidence. They can tell the difference between nonsense and reasonable scientific evidence. And most people with education understand that vaccines are important, including with the MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps, rubella. Yeah, a few high-status people thought the government was covering it up. But what we know is the evidence was that the vaccine was safe. But most people aren't high educated. That's even if 30 to 40% now have university education in European countries. That's 60 to 70% who don't, and much more of older people who don't.
Investing in educational systems, strengthening trust in science and institutions by engaging in direct communication, training the population to deal with uncertainty involving communities, writing and telling together a story about a better world. And to do this, we start with a podcast. With these insights, we conclude Worst Worlds, the podcast that tells us how misinformation worsens our quality of life and what we can do to combat it. A communication project by Cesare Buquicchio, developed in collaboration with the Harvard T.H. School of Public Health (EPREP) program and supported by the NATO Science for Peace and Security program. Special thanks to Elena Savoia, Veronica Bartolucci, Luca Di Fiore, Francesco Gesualdo, Caroline Ducchi, Diana Romersi and Alessio Viscardi for their collaboration.